Welcome back to the Tab Cares podcast. In this second episode, we're diving into how grief affects different age groups. Ryan Jones brings his expertise in psychology to explore the unique challenges faced by children, teens, adults, and the elderly as they navigate their paths through loss. Each story is different, and today, we're listening to real voices sharing real experiences. Stay with us as we uncover the diverse emotional landscapes of grief across generations.
So for those of you who were with us the first episode, nice to have you back. If this is your first episode that you've watched, I'm happy that you're here. Just to reintroduce myself, my name is Ryan Jones. I am an academic advisor here at Western Kentucky University. I advise for the Ogden College of Science and Engineering. I received my undergrad degree here back in the fall of 2019 and my master's degree in the spring of 2022 in student affairs and higher education. While getting that degree, I worked for 3 years at the Rivendell Behavioral Health and Psychological Hospital here down in Bowling Green, Kentucky. So with that being said, let's get started with the first caller's question.
I'm a teenager and I lost my best friend. My parents say I should be over it by now. Is there a right time frame to grieve?
The answer I'm going to give is a simple one, given the complicated topic, and that is no. There is no singular model or way to handle grief. Your parents may be saying you should be over it by now because they're older, and they may have experienced multiple events that cause grief, which would potentially make it easier for them to cope with it. With that being said, I believe you should, and remember to be respectful, of course, I believe you should speak with your parents and ask them if they remember their first time experiencing a loss such as this. I say to ask this question, again, ask it respectfully, because it may help them regain some of the empathy, and it may help them realize that they should look at it from your point of view and from your shoes. Thus, they will be able to help you more adequately through that difficult time, because they may just not have their mind in the right place or be thinking of it from your point of view. All right. Caller number 2's question.
As a young adult, I find it hard to grieve openly at work. How can I balance my professional life and my grieving process?
Okay. So, thank you for your question as well. Balancing your professional life while grieving can be tricky. If you have an adequate or just a quality supervisor or manager, you may start by letting them know the situation if you're comfortable, or if there's an HR rep or whatever it may be, that, or somebody who handles that at your job. The reason I'm saying this is because it will allow them to either give you time away from the job as you would have, of course, been allotted at that time, or they may give you resources that help with grieving that you may have been unbeknownst to having beforehand. Also, if you're comfortable with this, giving your team, colleague, coworkers, whoever it may be, a heads up of the situation. You don't necessarily have to go into detail with doing this as well. This may allow them to either leave you to yourself, so that you don't have to have as much social interaction on the job as you usually would. Or if you're comfortable with this as well, it will give you the opportunity for them to create a safe place for you to open up. Open up to them, I guess, if you're comfortable with those colleagues. So it's really up to preference, but when you are transparent, any quality workplace will understand your loss, and they will allow you the ability to ease back into your work schedule as needed. Okay. Caller number 3's question, please.
I'm in my late 30s and recently lost my brother. I'm finding it hard to support my kids and his kids through their grief while managing my own. What should I do?
Okay. So this is a good one. So for children or teens, given usually how they, I guess, given how they usually are, they have their own unique way of grieving. Loss tends to affect children, teens, adolescents in different ways than adults. So depending on their age, their experience, their maturity level, all children will have a different experience from the next. So oftentimes a child's grief is overlooked or overshadowed by adults who may also be grieving the same loss, as in the case of a sibling or a grandparent that is passed away. Although you as a parent are grieving, and rightfully so, it is important to guide your kids as well, because what they are going through may be a very new wave of emotions that they have never experienced before. So this is basically giving your child every piece of advice that you may or may not have received as a child when you endured the grieving process for the first time. For caller number 4.
My elderly parents seem to grieve differently. They lost a close friend but hardly talk about it. Is this normal for their age?
Thank you for your question. This is something that I dealt with a lot on the geriatric unit at the hospital. So I would say how the grieving process looks isn't necessarily about what is normal for their age, but it is a variety of factors such as past experiences with trauma and loss that largely affects how they grieve. Elderly people feel the pain of loss after a loved one dies as everyone else does. But it is possible that they process their grief according to their emotional maturity, their lost experiences, and ultimately their outlook on life. An older adult will likely face some, if not all, of the stages of grief, beginning with the shock and disbelief of their loved one's death. But as the reality of their loss starts to set in, they may tend to move quicker to accepting that their loved one is no longer here because of that, again, emotional maturity or their experiences and outlook on life. Also, not to mention, if the older person is a religious person and they do believe the afterlife, this can bring about a sense of peace for them, because if they believe that their friend, yes, they're sad that they're no longer here on earth, but they have moved on to a better place, this can help guide them to the accepting stage a little bit easier than others who may not believe in something like that. So that's just one thing to keep in mind as well. Okay, so the next caller's question, please.
I'm a single mother in my 20s, and I lost my own mother. How do I explain death and grief to my young child?
Okay, so hello. I'm glad you called, and that I'm sorry for your loss. I guess to start out by saying that really there's no way to get around it. It's emotionally grueling to tell your child that someone they knew or loved has died, and it's not a task that any parent looks forward to. Plus, the difficulty is also compounded by your own grief, as well as your concerns about how to break the news to your child, what your child will understand, and whether you'll be able to answer the questions that they inevitably will have. It's important to remember, not only for yourself, but so when you do have this talk, you can convey this to them, that death is a part of life. So it's important to help your child become accustomed to the idea that people sometimes die. You may be inclined to kind of soften the concept of death with euphemisms, but it's best to be forthright when breaking the news to your child. While you shouldn't necessarily go into any distressing details, always try to tell your child the facts while also using terms that they can understand. So by telling your child the truth, even when it's difficult or painful, you maintain their trust and your authority, while also opening up the opportunity to have those tough conversations, because, God willing, you're going to have these tough conversations throughout their life. And if this is the first one that you've had, and you can look back and say, okay, we dealt with it this way, when it's time to have another tough conversation, it won't be an entirely new process. So just kind of like any other skill, this is a skill. Having those tough conversations is a skill that I hate to say that you have to hone those skills. So when it does happen, you're not necessarily blindsided by these conversations and having to have them. Question or calling number 6 question.
I've noticed that my teenage son, who lost a classmate, seems to be withdrawing from family and friends. How can I help him?
Okay. So thank you for your question. Many adolescents have an adult understanding of the concept of death, but they don't have the experiences or the coping skills or the behavior of an adult, if that makes sense. So for bereaved teens who haven't yet experienced these landslides of emotions related to loss, most will not possess the self-sufficient care knowledge to properly cope with them. So this leads me to believe that the best course of action to help your child would be to strive to keep normalcy in their life. So what do I mean by this? Carrying on with normal activities can help the teen feel just that, normal. This doesn't mean that you sweep whatever happened under the rug. You have to, of course, acknowledge it, but carrying on with normal activities can help the teen feel just normal. So like giving the teen special treatment actually can cause them more stress and make them feel more of an outsider than a part of the quote unquote in crowd. Lastly, starting that tense but necessary conversation will be key to returning to normalcy as well. And you have to make it known that you are there for them whenever they would like to talk. So as teens, I know we always give them the connotation of being moody, they can be isolated. But given this situation, you have to let them be the ones to kind of want to initiate those talks. Hovering over them and continuing to ask questions can cause them to want to push away and want to be, divisive. You don't necessarily have to force the issue to have the conversation, but you need to let the child know or the teen know that when you want to talk, you have that opportunity. Whatever's going on, when it's your time, when you feel that you want to have this talk, we're going to have that talk. So opening that door for them to walk through it is basically what is the best bet for dealing with a teen that is starting to become isolated. Caller number 7's question.
As a middle-aged man, I feel pressure to be strong and not show my grief after losing my wife. How do I deal with societal expectations?
Okay. Thank you for being open about your question. That is, as it is one that I know all too well. As you previously mentioned, for men, we are constantly berated with expectations that suppress our emotions. And that is just a largely unhealthy method of operating. So you see, as men, we are more likely to put up a wall and respond in a stoic manner when faced with grief, when in reality, we need to find a trusted source who is willing to hear our cries, even when we can't. Okay? So if you don't have a person who you feel comfortable venting to, there is nothing wrong. If you can do this, there is nothing wrong with seeking out a therapist. I will say that again. There is nothing wrong with seeking out a therapist. I myself have had to do this before. Mainly because the therapist will ultimately be there to listen to you and help you get all of your emotions out on the table and out in the open, and for you to start sifting and sifting through these emotions and figuring out how to cope healthily. So the best part also about seeking out professional help is they are ethically required to practice confidentiality, meaning what you say in that room will stay in that room. The only people that will know, if as long as you want it to be this way, the only people that will know what has happened or what was said in that room is you, your therapist, and God. That is it. So I know it's taboo, especially in the Black community. Like when you reach out to a therapist, you're crazy. That I know we're starting to shift away from that these days, but understand that there is nothing wrong with seeking out professional help. There's nothing wrong with that. There would be a lot more people still if they did seek out the professional help, because a lot of times us as men, we suffer in silence because we feel like there's nobody that will hear us, when in reality there are people that will. Okay. And this is caller number 8. I believe this is the last question for the episode.
I'm a grandfather who's grieving the loss of a lifelong friend, my wife. I'm struggling, but also need to be there for my grandkids. Any tips on balancing this?
Okay. Thank you for your question. One thing to remember is that your grandkids, of course, and I'm sure you know this, your grandkids need you and you need them. And here's what I mean. As you begin to think about ways to help them cope with the loss, the quality time spent with them and the conversations had will allow an opportunity for you to grow closer to them than before. So talk about what happened. Be calm and quiet, of course, when doing that. Tell the truth and keep it simple. Answer all the questions honestly that they may have, and make sure that the child understands your answers. More importantly, also share your own feelings about the loss, and make sure that the child understands your answer. Okay? Understand what you're saying. And because when you're sharing about your loss, they may ask questions because you're conveying it in a way that they may not be experienced with, of course, with them being a child. Keep in mind that when you inevitably ask the child to share their feelings about the loss, that you may have to put their feelings into words, like help them put their feelings into words. By doing this, you are not only helping them navigate through their feelings, but you're also navigating through yours. So you're almost having a back and forth counseling session, because as we know, kids can be honest as well, but they also can be good, especially when going through something where they actually want to learn about what they're feeling, what's going on. So remember that you can't necessarily protect your grandchildren from sadness, but you can help them through the grieving process and ultimately get to that acceptance stage. Your support will let your grandchildren know that, one, mainly that they are not alone. And your understanding will help your grandchildren understand and cope with the terrible thing that has happened to them. At this moment, that they may feel like the only person that they have that understands them is you. So just making sure to be there for them to lean on and lean into while they go through this experience is going to be key. And then also, they're your grandchildren. Lean into them as well. Because at the end of the day, family is family and love will be love. I know we went through a lot of information today, but I hope that you were able to get any type of information that would help you get through this grieving process. As always, I'm praying for you all. I'm praying that you all find peace, hopefully in somewhere in this podcast. I know I'm not necessarily the one that can give the ultimate healing. I mean, that's up to him, of course. But of course, just keep your family and your loved ones wrapped in each other's arms, because when things like this happen, it's the ones that we're close to who are going to help each other, get to the next step. All right. Love you all, and thank you all for listening.